Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Hi, this is a Christian subject, just to be clear here. I'm pondering the idea, and something I don't have it fully formed yet, but I just want to share my thoughts that are in progress, about the question of pray always, because it's something that Christians should do, is to pray always. But there's sort of a practical problem with this if you take this literally. Just to make it very clear, if you were to say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Without stop, continuously, you would have a very hard time doing other things that Christians are supposed to do, even something as simple as, for example, finding out what somebody, if somebody needs something to eat, or finding out, what he'd like to eat if you're trying to feed the hungry. Or it'd be very hard to visit somebody in prison if you will never stop, repeating the words of a formal prayer in order to even say the name of the person you were there at prison to visit. So, it's a bit silly to put it this way, but, it's not practical to be praying always in the sense of always saying formalized words. And obviously everyone knows that that's not what's meant, but the question comes up, what is meant? How do you actually do this in practice? Now, I think one common approach is, roughly speaking, to more or less pray a lot. It's not the same thing as praying always. Pray whenever you have the opportunity and aren't doing something else, which is good, to be sure. Not in any way trying to criticize that, but I don't think that's, and while it's in the spirit of it, it's not that thing. And, it's possible that this is meant more as a metaphor than as literally, but I don't think it makes sense to give up. Not literally in the sense of obviously not to, continually be always making sound with your mouth. But nonetheless, it may have a more direct and more literal meaning than merely to, pray whenever you're not doing something else, or to pray frequently, or what have you. And so, what is that? I really wonder. It's something I've been pondering. And it seems to me that one approach to this is to consider things in themselves. Now, before I get into it, just think about things in themselves, because anything in the world that you contemplate, the central fact about that thing is God. All things that are created, the central fact about them is their creator. And in the sense of, he who maintains them in existence presently, since creation is an ongoing thing, not a, one-off. And so everything in the world, if you really consider it properly, it does tell you about its creator. And so in this sense, in the sense of prayer being, prayer being talking with God in that loose sense, communicating with God, God talking to us. And that's something in his video on prayer that I discussed before, Bishop Barron talked about, that, that we emphasize a lot the us talking to God. We don't emphasize as much the God talking to us part of this. But especially in that part of it, if you contemplate anything in the world, it tells you about God. That's, in a sense, the primary thing it's really doing, is it is speaking to you about some aspect of the glory of God, of the goodness of God. And so, and I mean this, in the trivial things, a pen testifies to the glory of God if you really consider the pen itself. Because what we always do is we think of everything in a utilitarian fashion. That is to say, we think of a pen not as the pen, but rather as a writing implement, which is to say we think of it as something that we can use to write. Which really means that we are thinking about our purposes. We are being utilitarian in the sense of thinking about, what do I want to accomplish? What are my goals? What is it that I am trying to do? Not what are the things with which I am interacting? What is it that I am doing? It's not the emphasis becomes too much on the I, what am I doing, not the what am I doing? And so if you stop and think about it, or rather not stop and think about it, but if you incorporate the thinking about it into the doing so that you aren't stopping. And that, I think, is the key to turning this into always praying, is to, in all things in all things that you deal with, in all things that you do, to regard the things and not yourself, to be looking at the world around you, not to be continually focused inward so that you ignore the things that you are dealing with. And it seems to me that that is that may be the key, that this is a way to get at praying always. Because if we do that, if you actually consider all the things with which you interact all the time and consider them in themselves, and in relation to yourself, I'm not saying to pretend that you're not there, but to consider the thing, not merely yourself, that thing will be telling you about God. It will be telling you about God's good purpose. Now, not all of God all at once. No created thing can tell you about all of God, let alone all at once. So all created things tell you something about God, just as, prayer is, it's composed of a bunch of words, and each word doesn't mean the totality of God, even in a prayer. So, even in Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord doesn't mean the same thing as the Christ. It means something different and is telling you something different, when you're on that word versus the other word. So the fact that you are using, the fact that any given thing is only telling you something about God doesn't really distinguish it from any other form of prayer whatsoever, because all forms of prayer are only telling you about some aspect of God at the moment. Inherently, and you couldn't receive it all anyway. It's necessary for it to be broken down into smaller pieces so that you can even understand it. So this is the idea that I'm still working through and trying to figure out, and especially trying to figure out how to implement in practice. But it's something I wanted to bring up and share and, invite discussion of, is that, and you see this, by the way, in the I can't remember which monastic group. I think the Benedictines certainly encourage mindfulness, to be paying attention to what you're actually doing. And I read the Rule of Saint Benedict. I can't remember if it's the Benedictines or someone else now. And, I think their language is somewhat different, even if the purpose is the same. But, so anyhow, it's to really pay attention to the world, to not be wrapped up in ourselves, but to pay attention to the world, is itself, properly understood, a form of prayer. So, want to throw that out, be interested to see what people think, and just trying to work this through and find out if any part of this idea is intelligible when I put it into words. So, until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.